Okay, hello guys. How are you guys doing? I know it's the end of the day, so I hope you guys are still, having that, energy to absorb. I hope so. Yeah. Okay. This is another session in journey mapping. Okay, and Janna DeVylder, she is a co-founder and principal of Melt Studios. Over 70 years of experience as a researcher and designer in the US and Australia, focused on humanizing products and services. Janna has experience leading in-house design teams, design agencies, and engaging with clients across C-level leadership, IT marketing, product management, and sales. Very active in Interaction Design Association, IXDA, serve as president of the board, as well as co-chair of the Global Interaction Awards. Janna received a master's degree from University of Chicago in psychology and anthropology. Holds honors bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Iowa. Without further delay, give round of applause to Janna.
Okay, and the last of the day, is that right? The last session? Almost? There's another session. Okay, I'll keep you up. And if I'm boring, just say, and then I'll do something different to make it exciting for you. I don't know where to stand. So I have this need to draw as I'm talking, so we'll see how we go. So journey mapping. What's a journey? What's a map? Why are we mapping journeys? Why should you be here? So journey mapping is both a process, the act of mapping a journey of your customer and your organization, but it's also an artifact, the journey map. And so what I'll talk to you today is about what process do you go through to make a journey map? What kinds of things do you put in it? And then I'll talk to you about how you actually use the maps. And so I'll actually start by saying that you don't need to be able to draw to do this. Everybody says that I can't draw. That's not true. I studied psychology, and I can sort of draw enough to make damage. So I'll just put that there. Okay, you've heard about the company. So we started 7.5 years ago, really with our mission to improve people's lives. And the way that we wanted to do that was to actually help organizations create better services and experiences. Because if you think about your day, think about all the things that you had to do today and how you got here and all of the services and things that you interacted with to actually get here. Ooh, it's moody. Hello. So organizations make up so much of our lives. And so the way that we wanted to actually improve people's lives was to say, hey, banks, universities, insurance companies, government, universities, we want to help you make better things for the people you're serving, because that will make our lives better across the board. So that's why we're here. I hope that you share in that desire in what you're making and what you're doing, because you are putting things out into the world. So think about who you're designing for. And so we use the journey maps as a way to both capture and communicate and to create consensus across a large group of people to make sure that we're all thinking and seeing the same things. Because if I asked all of you to say, think of a chair, everybody has a different version of chair that's in your head. And we say, yes, I've got a chair. And then later on, when I say, but wait, the chair isn't moving. And you say, but chairs don't move. We all think that we know what a chair is, but we all have very different views. Making things visible, visual, helps to make sure that we all are saying and thinking the same things. So it's a little bit washed out, but here's just the beginning of one of the maps that we've done. And so let me just introduce you to sort of the high-level characteristics of what makes up a map, and we'll get into sort of the nitty-gritty pieces. So there's different points in time in a project that you might be actually doing a map. So let's say that you're at the beginning of a new product, a new service, or maybe you just have no idea what experience your customers are having right now today. So what we call that is a current state map. So literally, what steps are your customers going through in order to use your product or service? That's one way to think about a journey. What's their journey with you, with your product or service? Another is to think about what's their journey in life. Like, what does a day in their life look like? How do they get to work? You can be thinking about it from their point of view, and maybe your product fits into one part of that day. Not the whole day, but one part of the day. But it helps you to understand the full day, so maybe you can better understand how you're fitting in. So usually along the top, we're always looking at the customer's experience, and customer can be students, citizens, teachers, consumers who are buying things from you. So I use customer in a very broad sense. They're going through stages or phases of experience. In this example, this one is for a museum in Melbourne. And this was a current state to understand how do people find out about us? So awareness, how do they know that we exist? Once they know that we exist, how do they plan? How do they decide what they're going to do, when they're going to come, how they're going to get there? How do they get there? When they're there, how do they enter and pay? Once they're in the museum, what do they do? Where do they go? When they leave, what do they do? When they're home, is there any connection back with us? Do they return? So this was really to understand, because that museum wanted to better understand what are our opportunities around making better experiences. Are there gaps where we're not doing anything? Are we doing anything in the planning piece to help them plan? Or are they using other things to plan and we're not covering that? So that's the customer's experience of today. And then you'll usually have underneath what we call the backstage, the behind the scenes. What's happening within your organizations to make that moment happen? So it could be that for planning, perhaps they have a planning tool on their website, as an example. There's things that they're doing behind the scenes to make that calendar happen, or to make that planning tool happen. So these things don't just exist on their own. You are doing hard work behind the scenes, and what you're doing is you're showing your journey inside the business to make that happen. And then a lot of times we're putting down at the bottom the systems, the artifacts, the tools. What are the materials or things that needed to, almost the ingredients that needed to be in that moment for that to happen? So it could be for planning, maybe part of it's a call center, so you have a call center, maybe you have a planning app. It's just a way to isolate some of the ingredients. But then we have different characters over here. I really think about these journeys as basically you're making a movie. What's the movie that you're making with your product or your service? Who are all the characters? What are all the scenes? How do they all interplay and interact with each other to make an experience happen? This is basically storyboarding of like what they do in movies, but you're doing that for your product or your service. So first I want to talk to you about what's the process you go through to actually make a map. And so at the heart of what we do is we use a design process, a human-centered design process. And so human-centered design is basically I'm understanding who I'm designing for, so I'm understanding who my customers are, and not just in a profile kind of sense and what the demographic is, but I understand how they're living, how they're thinking, how they're feeling, what they're doing, where are they, where in their life does our product or our service fit in. And sometimes I need to understand that moment that we fit in, but sometimes I need to understand all the other things around in their lives because it impacts what we're doing. And so you have to understand people because you're designing for people, what their needs are, what their goals are, and it's not just what they say they want, but sometimes what they need is what they can't even articulate. So this is why we observe, we see, we watch behavior to understand, because sometimes people don't even realize that that's what they're doing. So understanding customers. So there's two ways that you can start to understand customers. you're probably doing a lot of these things today. The most important thing for us is the qualitative. So qualitative being that more open-ended questions versus the quantitative. So for me, the quantitative can be, let's say that you see in your analytics that people are putting things into the cart and then they're abandoning, right? This is the classic, we can see the big drop off in the conversion funnel and you go, that's a problem, we need to fix that. The big question is why? Why are people abandoning? This is where the qualitative actually comes into play. You need to talk to people to understand, well, why is it that you're abandoning at that moment? But that's very much around the experience with your product or your service specifically. But there's also other things in their lives where if we don't ask them, we won't really understand. You start to make assumptions about what those things are because you think, well, I'm a human, so I can just jump to conclusions, but we shouldn't. We should always ask them. You need both. Both are really useful together. I think if you're only doing quantitative, you're missing a huge, huge part of the value that you should be getting from your customers. So how do we do that? We go out, we talk to people. Sometimes we do desk research because there's a lot of really smart people in the world who have done a lot of research around human behavior and how people think and what they need. So sometimes we can use what other people have done. We also talk to people internally in our businesses because sometimes maybe you've talked to a lot of your customers and you hear a lot of the stories, and that's really, really valuable. We need to hear straight from the customers as well, but sometimes getting those other stories from inside your business is also important. As you're gathering, so the thing I want to emphasize here is that you may be thinking, this is going to take up too much time, it's going to take up too much money, how in the world could I have all these conversations with all these people? Just have even one conversation. If you just walk out of this room and at least talk to one customer, I will be happy because it doesn't have to be a lot. This is not around trying to make your life harder. This is actually better business for you. This is about making your life easier because what you'll be making decisions on will be better informed. So as you're gathering, you're taking notes, but afterwards be reflecting on what really sticks with you. But start to capture as you go, and as you talk to more customers, you're going to start to see patterns, and things will start to come to life, and you'll start to better understand why things are happening. Sharing stories. This is huge. There's going to be people in this room who will have the opportunity to talk to customers, and there's going to be people in your organizations who never touch a customer, never see them. I don't mean literally touch, but maybe we'll leave it at that. Never get to go out and never get to go out and actually communicate with customers directly, which is a shame. So sometimes you have to be the one bringing the voice back of the customer back into your company. So journey maps is one way to start to tell those stories, because this is what this is about, storytelling. You're trying to create empathy with the people in your organization and with yourself. So tell those stories, tell them to talk to each other, start to better understand. And we go through analysis and synthesis, and I know there's this stereotype of design thinking and Post-it notes and Sharpies, and you just put stuff on the wall and magic happens. I wish it was that easy. It's not always that easy. But the reason why we do this, I know it's very stereotypical of design thinking, but the reason why we do this is to get it outside of ourselves, to get it up so that we can be sharing it with other people. That's all it is. Because if we keep it in ourselves, we're not actually building. So this is why we put things out there. I also use spreadsheets. I love spreadsheets and doing analysis in spreadsheets as well. But that's another way that I can work with people who I'm not in the same room with. So don't let remote working stop you from here. And visualize. So sometimes we just write and write and write, and we put everything in words, and sometimes we just need to draw conceptual models of how people engage and what the flows are. So you just need to start expressing yourself in ways that start to help you make better sense, and it shows those connections in between. But this is how we work. I mean, if somebody could please design a full wall of a big iPad thing where I could write all over it. I would be paperless, I swear. We're not there yet, so I apologize to the earth. We're going to use paper for a little bit more until we get there. But it's the only way for us to start to share. And the thing about doing things on paper is that we get into these habits of collecting things and going away and making the perfect PowerPoint presentations and then coming back out and telling the stories because we want it to be so polished. And what we're doing is a disservice because we're not leaving things raw, and we're not letting people build, and we're not making connections across a group of people. So being raw like this is a vulnerable place to be because you feel like it's not well thought out yet, and it's not perfect, and maybe it's not clear yet. But part of the act of actually just being raw is to let ourselves, to be okay not knowing everything. We don't know everything yet, and that's okay. And that's hard for some, I know, in some bigger organizations where everybody wants everything to be so polished. But this is why we go like this. So why do we map? It's the sharing what we've learned. So let's say you've gone out, you've gathered all this information, and now you want to start to tell stories back to other people who aren't in the room. We use visualizations and make these maps to start to say, well, first our customers are doing this, and then they're doing this, and some of them are doing this, and others are doing this, and 25% are doing that, and then next, and next, and next. Because most of the time, most organizations have no clue what the actual end-to-end experience is for their customers. We talk about little points in time, but we don't talk about how they're connected. And seeing them connected is really useful. This project was a project that we did for the State Library of Victoria. So a library in the middle of Melbourne. It's huge. They were wanting to, they were going out for, I think, was it $40 million in funding to refurbish sort of the library of the future. But part of it is they needed to understand what is the future of the library and what does experience look like in the library. And so we went through an extensive process to better understand what those spaces and places and what kind of services the library needed to be providing to be there. And this was a way to actually start to both, the process of getting to this view was with the librarians and the people who work in the library, but also with visitors. But then they had this view that they could actually then take to as their business case. So rather than just getting up and telling a PowerPoint presentation, they could say, come, please, gather around this story. Let me walk you through what we want our future customer experience to be. So you bring people in, they gather around, and you can actually tell stories. And that is so much more powerful than just sitting and listening to the PowerPoint. I'm not anti-PowerPoint, by the way. You can do journey maps in PowerPoint. I have had to do that many times. So this is not, I just prefer out. Especially if you're doing this for other people. I know some of you here have your own businesses or work in businesses, so you would be doing it for yourselves. Especially if you're consulting or an agency and you're doing it for other people. Part of it is you want people to own it. So if you're in-house and you're doing this, it's not just, oh, that's Janna's map. No, we have created this together. I've facilitated a process, but this is ours, and this is our journey that we're working together. The way that we set up the maps, we deliberately put the customer experience first at the top because it's that outside-in perspective. It's how do customers experience what they're doing with you or in their lives. It's not a business-led process. And this one, oh, I need to use this because it's very exciting. My little pointer. This is my little... the organizational silos, because especially in large organizations, we have so many different people doing, like, my job is this, and my job is marketing, and my job over here is doing, I'm doing acquisition. The thing about it is we barely ever look across and say, how are we all working together? So if you think about the movie metaphor again, a movie is made up of people who make up costumes, makeup, there's characters, somebody's written a script, there's the director, there's lighting. All of these people have to work together, or else if you don't work together, you can tell the movies that are just really choppy and they're not sort of choreographed. This actually helps us to shine a bright light on the fact that most of the time our end-to-end experiences for our customers are not choreographed. And so you get one experience at the beginning of engaging with you, and then once I'm using your product, it's a whole other experience, and I have to call somebody else and do something else. And it just starts to shine a light on the fact that we're not really talking internally, and there could be a lot more efficiency there. The bigger picture, it's pretty rare that you can step back and see the whole end-to-end and then kind of zoom into parts, so that's nice. And then the empathy for customers. So it doesn't have to be complicated. You can take an A3 sheet of paper, A4, A5, sticky note, whatever level of paper you want to use, and you can start to do this. In a way to start to practice is to, a lot of the things that we do in our workshops is around sort of a transport experience. How do people get from door to door, so from their homes to the work or back? And we actually have people go out and do the journey and then start to capture, okay, there's sort of functional things that I'm doing. I'm opening the door, I'm going down the stairs, I'm going down the street. Those are functional things that you capture. But how am I feeling? I'm feeling nervous because I have a talk that I'm giving at Magic, and are they going to like me? And so I'm walking and thinking about that, so I'm not really paying attention about how I'm getting there. I hope you like me. Sorry, that was pathetic. So there's the emotional things. There's also the anticipatory things. What are they expecting? We all have our sort of what I call duct-taped moments where things don't work quite the way that we want, but we found workarounds and we can just do them. So there's things that people do to make things work for them, even though they're not built that way. So one way to think about it is a structured capture tool. So this is one example, but you can just, if you're trying to capture the experience of today, there's sort of the what happened. So these are those functional steps. You can sort of capture the artifacts. So what's around that person? Did they have paper? Was there a machine there? Was there a kiosk? Was there an information sign? Just what are some of these are just ways to help you remember, like, what are the things I should be looking for when I come in and I'm observing people potentially, or I'm talking to people? The customer voice, what are people thinking or feeling in those moments? So a lot of times when we do work for transportation, we actually shadow people. We walk with them as they go through an experience, and we have them talk aloud, but that's what talking is. They just talk, and they tell us what they're thinking. They think aloud, that's what I mean. They think aloud, and so then we can understand, what are they trying to decide? What are they frustrated about? What are they thinking about? But then we're also capturing sort of those issues and pain points as well. So this is just a way for you to, if you're feeling like, I don't know what I need to be capturing when I go out and look at these things, you can already start to make a decision for yourself around, these are the things I'm going to look for, because that might make a difference. So here's let me just show you some examples. Sorry, it's a little washed out here. The big takeaway here is the map can be whatever you need it to be. So I'm not going to stand up here and say there's one way to do journey maps, because there are several ways. So I'm going to give you some different flavors, and then you need to decide for yourselves what's going to work for you. So in this particular example, this is from a different company, just to show you the different flavors of maps. Here up at the top, what they've done is they've done the thoughts and feelings of their customer sort of across the board. And so they've chosen sort of a prototypical customer to sort of represent. So it's almost like a persona a little bit in a way. Personas can be a little bit challenging at times, because I think it can start to, we start to miss a lot of the nuance, because we just start to think about a large group of people as one person. However, in terms of storytelling, this might literally be Sarah's experience. So what is Sarah thinking and feeling as she goes from inquiring about a product, to comparing the product, to purchasing the product, to installing the product? here's sort of the emotional experience. Here's things that literally that she did. She called to order. She's been on hold for too long. She ends the phone call. So that's one flavor that this company did. Here they actually sort of described what the phases were and then recommendations. So this is more of a current state, and recommendations are what might need to change in this moment. You can see that this kind of flavor isn't really detailed, so it's very high level and conceptual. Sorry, the screen is a little hard to read. Let me skip to other ones. This one is one around traveling, and so the phases of travel, so pre-travel. And this is literally where we've shadowed people and we take pictures. So we just take pictures, so you don't have to feel like you have to draw everything. You can be very literal and take pictures of what their experience is. So what are they trying to do? What are the types of things that they're experiencing? Here's where we start to rate sort of good experience, sort of up at the top, to poor or low. And it just starts to show how I don't feel the same thing all the time. There's certain moments where I'm like, that really worked, and that's fine. And then suddenly I come into some tension or some friction, and then my experience goes down. And what you notice is that people remember the highs, but they really, really remember the lows. And if you can't recover from the low in the next step or ever, one low can just set the whole stage moving forward. So this is a nice way to think about emotion. But this is where we actually just said some what ifs, which were more just around, not recommendations, but just like, what if? Yeah, exactly. So maps of, what if the maps of the entire system were here rather than just where are you right now? So it's just little things that have started to come up for us that we just start to say the what ifs rather than saying firm recommendations. And this is the one from before. This is a much more detailed service map. And it just depends on where you are in your process and how detailed you need to be. So if you need to choreograph a whole bunch of people to be delivering service in the same way, you may very much want to say, first you do this, and then you do this, and then you do that. Like, you may want to be very, very, very particular. If you want to give people freedom to do what they need to do in the moment, but there's a principle or philosophy, you don't need to literally be so detailed about what's happening in these moments. These are the things you get to decide. So here's just some of the things that a map can include. Always, the thing that it always has is the phases. And so if I think about the phases, I may think about sort of Janna's day, which might be morning, afternoon, sort of night. Like, those may be the phases of my day. Or it can be literally, what's Janna's experience with my product or service, which is that more awareness, sort of exploration, purchase, use. The thing that may be is that this journey may be 5 minutes, or it could be multiple days. So part of the thing that you have to decide is what's your time frame, and that just because it's in a journey, the journey starts to give you a sense that one thing is happening after the other. So you have those scenes, which are sort of, if these are phases, the scenes are the things that are happening in each of these moments. The actors are literally the characters. Who's in that scene? Is it me? Is it you? Who from your business is in that moment? And sometimes actors are systems, right? It can be that they're integrated, they're dealing with your app. So it may not be that it's a person-to-person experience, but that's an actor as well. Artifacts, papers, what are the things that I need around me? So if I'm applying for a loan online, some of the artifacts that I might need are, I might need my license number, and I might need my my credit card information. These are all artifacts of things that I need in order to make that moment happen. Emotions, how am I feeling? How do we want people to be feeling? Issues, quotes. This is again just about storytelling. What if people said when they get to a certain spot, that is the best customer response that I've ever, that's the best support response I've ever had. That's a great thing to put in there as a current state piece. This is also to say, when you're doing a current state map, don't just focus on all of the stuff that's going wrong, right? Because I've been in the room when you tell the client, here's your journey, and here's the fail, 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 fail. The room shuts down, everybody's arms go like this, and it's your fault, and everybody immediately gets defensive. So the thing that you have to do is to balance how are you actually going to be communicating what's happening so that people can actually be productive and do something with it. So part of the thing that you need to be capturing here is not only the issues, but also what are the successes. Because you don't need to throw out everything and start from scratch. There's a lot of things that are working well, and actually you can learn from the things that are working well and keep doing those. That front stage and backstage, that's really that customer piece. So the different types of maps, we talked about the current state piece. What's happening today? What are those pain points? What are those pleasure points? What are those opportunities? Where are their gaps? The future state maps are, where are we going? What do we want it to be? What needs to be true to bring that to life? The customer journey maps is really, and these are both, they can either be current or future state. So customer journey map can be what the customer's experience is through the process. But also these service and ecosystem maps kind of is a bigger zoom out and looking at the ecosystem of your environment. So a really easy example is to think about universities. Universities have lots of services and lots of experiences in them. And sometimes we zoom out and actually show, like the library as an example, all of the parts. It's almost like looking up over a city, and you can see that there's lots of different journeys that can come through the different parts of the organization or the different products and services that you have. So we talked about that outside-in piece. I already did that. Okay. This is important. Sometimes you may be talking about the single journey, just this whole end-to-end process is a 5-minute process and that's it. Sometimes they have to go through multiple things multiple times with you. So it may be that if I'm going to a hospital, I may be, the first journey is going to see my GP, my general physician. Then the second time I go in, I'm going in to actually have a treatment done. And the third time I'm going in, I'm actually going in to actually hear what the result is. And the fourth time I'm coming in, I'm going in to do something else. And so it could be that those all line up into one big journey. But it could also be that different types of customers have different experiences at the same time. So you just have to decide where you want to focus. But sometimes things don't go straight through. Sometimes they loop back. So this is why in our journey sometimes we go, it's the fork in the road. You go sometimes you keep going straight and some people come back around. If you're customizing something and you say, yes, I'm ready, I'm going to go buy it. And then somebody goes, I want to fix that. I'm going to go back and do that again. So you can start to show that movement in those ecosystems. The museum map that I showed you, this is how it started. Now, yes, the woman who worked on this can draw. She's a very good conceptual thinker as well. But in case you need to be able to draw a person, you can practice right now. Draw a circle. can even call that a triangle. Leg, leg. You got a person. You can even just do this, or you can do your stick people. So you can draw, but this just lets you say, that's Janna, or that's a service provider. This is the psychology major drawing here. So this is, but that's all it is. If you start to just create little characters for yourself, we also have started to use, we've created our own visual library just using InDesign, so we can just drag and drop characters in, so that making a map can be faster and faster for you to do that. We can see that we're then using our insights to start to draw on the map as well, so that's where we can start to, we can even start by writing out what the phases are. We've also done cutouts. I'm just trying to convey to you that it doesn't have to be complicated, it doesn't have to be polished. All it has to do is do the job for you and for what your business needs. Paper, paper, paper. These are the more polished maps that we do. And we really only go to this length if we're trying to, we have to tell a large audience a very complicated story, and they want something that's left behind that they can leave on the wall and people can come around. This is that one before was us, but this is a different company and the different way to do it. So we print them big. We can come up and move around. This one was around for a property management company, was just around how do people go through a leasing process? How do they then, when they decide to move in, how do they fit out the space? How do they move in? What's the experience when they're actually occupying the space and moving in? All of this is a service, right? Every single touch point. And as a business, you get to decide which are the key defining moments for you that you really focus on. Because maybe you don't need to do everything in all of these phases, but sometimes if you do one thing really well in some of these phases, you can make a huge difference. There we go. So you need to make sure that you're telling a story and that it flows from end to end. And make sure that the pieces fit together and they're not just little disjointed moments. And sometimes just by getting it all on one long piece of paper, that really helps. Now, some of this is just around if you're actually going into more formal designing of the maps. You need to think about that visual hierarchy of where people, those phases are sort of in that the biggest type and the biggest size, and just creating that visual hierarchy of here's our phases, here are the stages in them, here's this moment, and just being able to use that hierarchy to guide people's eyes. A lot of times along the moments we'll use sort of a green tick to say this is a really positive moment, this is working really well with our customers, and sometimes we'll do sort of the negative check mark or minus, just so people can quickly see where are those pain points and where are those opportunities. So we use InDesign to build those, but this has been a process that, over several years that we've built up for ourselves. You can use tools like, if you have an iPad, you can draw little characters and export it into little vector things if you want to do that using Adobe Capture, I think. You can use there's like an icon library. There's free stuff out there that you can use, so don't feel like it has to all be hand-drawn. That's just something that's been very important for us, but that doesn't need to be how you do it. And printing a long map can cost a lot of money sometimes, so just planning ahead, or make sure that you're good at taping things together, which we do a lot of. So here's the Noun project is a good one if you want to take this URL. They have lots of icons that are free, so you can just pull and use those to build your maps. Again, this is more if you want to do more of a digital piece. one of our designers wrote a great blog post around visualizing a story. And if you want to use other online tools, there's a lot of sort of tools that you can use now. Murally is one. Prezi, you can start to build things. A lot of these tools already have like things built in that you can just pull and drop and build from there. So these are just some action shots of using the maps, writing all over them. I mean, this is the point, right? We're not just trying to create something pretty that people look at. We're trying to create something that's useful. So you can't be afraid that once you've created it that people are going to draw all over it. You have to, because it's a starting point and it's not an end point. So if you don't have versions that just have stuff written all over it, then you're being too precious with what you're doing. Just some last thoughts around generating for the future. Sometimes when we create current state maps, let's say we created a map, and we start to identify that this part here, this part here, this part here, there's some gaps, there's some things that we're not doing well that we should be doing in a different way. We then go through that generative design process where we start to generate different ideas of, well, what could that be? What could that be? What could that be? We then take that and come up with, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ideas, start to figure out what are the different things that can be. And then we create our future state map, which has the new idea in it. So part of it is that your current state and your future state, this is where you are, this is where you want to be, and then as a business you get to decide how long is it going to take for us to get from where we are to this future view, right? And there's always going to be a new future view. And once you get there, you're going to figure out what your next future view is. However, you don't just become the future once you've drawn it. You have to figure out, these might then end up being 3 new projects that you have to take on, and you get to see that your new project has to fit in to this flow. So these are things that you can keep using and keep building and keep refining into your practice. So I think I'm going to stop here. Perfect, it's the last slide as well. So just so I can have some questions if you have any questions. Hi.
Hello, hi. So basically I would like to ask you about brainstorming process. More often than not, the brainstorming session turn out to be very fruitless, right? There's very little ideas that we could come up with. So how is it, what would be the best way to transcend our way of doing discussing and also brainstorming? That's one. Another one is that what is your thought on open discussions where we talk about our ideas or our thought with quite numbers of people at one time to have diversification in terms of thought and things like that. And the third thing is that how to encourage people to share their ideas more rather than be very secretive. Yeah,
that's right. I think I can answer all 3 in one go, which is there's a lot of ego in what we do, and everybody wants to feel like they're right and that their ideas are the best ideas. And so part of the thing is that you have to, as a group, agree that we're leaving the ego outside of the room. You have to make sure that if you're a very hierarchical organization, that if you are generating ideas, you're letting the junior people speak first. Because if you hear the senior people or the executives speak first, all the juniors will shut up and they won't express because, oh my God, I don't want to be wrong and I don't want to look dumb. So there's a culture of having to switch how ideas are shared. There's a big cultural thing about being the hero, right? And it's like, my idea is the one. So what I do in brainstorming is there's lots of different tools and things that you can use to structure that. But what I would say is you always generate ideas individually first. So nobody's talking, you're generating lots of ideas, and you make people generate more than one idea, at least 2 or 3 by themselves, if you framed what you're solving for. So if we say, when it comes to application, we know all these things are going wrong, and what we want here is we want a process that is 3 seconds long, no clicks, whatever your parameters are. Everybody just start to make ideas of what that could look like. Do individual first, have the junior people share, and then the senior people share. That way you're getting the individual points of view out rather than, so the thing about just talking is that it's still the loudest people in the room talking, and the people who are more timid or more introverted aren't going to have a voice. So I would say always start with individuals first and then share. But then also share ideas. So your idea gets passed to the next person. The next person has to build on it. So it doesn't become your idea anymore. It becomes a group idea. Or I give you my idea and you have to defend it. Or if I have to tell you my ideas, I turn my back and I read you my idea so I can't see your faces, because people always go, oh, yeah. So I can't see you looking at me right now in your faces. But I also, I set up game rules where I say, you can't say but. There's so many reasons why something can't work. That's not for now. Like, we'll figure out later how we make things work. It could never be 3 seconds long because, yeah, I know. But just play with me for a minute. Yeah. Anything else?
Hi.
1 minute. Yeah. Okay. Last one.
Can you share with us, from the fundamental level, why people choose these kinds of, these solutions or this approach? For their solutions?
A lot of times it's because they want to become more customer-centric, and they want to better understand what their customers are experiencing, and they don't actually have the full picture. So it's a way to get the full picture so they can make better decisions. That's basically the heart of it. I have to let you go now because you have to go to another session. But I'm happy to chat if... Do you have another session in here? Okay, I can chat with you outside if you'd like. Thank you.
You can also email to Janna directly. There goes the email. Before you leave, just to remind you on the survey form that you need to fill up. And yeah, just drop in at the reception counter. Thank you very much.